Hello, my friends. Welcome back. Before we begin, close your eyes for a moment if you can, and just listen. I'm going to tell you about a sound that has been declared dead in every single decade since the 1930s, a sound that corporations have tried to own, that engineers have tried to replicate, that electric motors have tried to replace. None of it worked. And somewhere in this story is the reason why. A reason that has nothing to do with nostalgia, nothing to do with stubbornness, and everything to do with a question that every generation of riders asks, even when they don't know they're asking it. And one moment in this story, one specific, strange, almost unbelievable legal event, is going to tell you more about what this sound actually means to people than any motorcycle review ever has. Stay with me. There is a sound that belongs to no other machine on earth. Not a high-pitched scream, not a turbine whine, not the clean hum of an electric motor. Something slower, deeper, a rhythm that pulses rather than spins, like a heartbeat, if a heartbeat were made of iron and gasoline. Potato, potato, potato. If you have heard it in person, you know exactly what it is. If you have only ever heard it through a screen, you somehow already know that it means something, that the machine making that sound is not trying to impress anyone, that it has been making that sound for over 100 years, and that it intends to keep making it regardless of whatever else changes around it. Every decade since the 1930s, someone has declared this style of motorcycle finished, that it belongs to the past, that younger riders want something faster, lighter, more connected, more electric. And every decade, the machine with that sound rolls back into view, unchanged in spirit, unmoved by the argument, and proves them wrong again. This is the story of the cruiser motorcycle. And the reason it never goes out of style is not what most people expect. Because it starts with a sound that nobody designed. A sound that happened by accident, by physics. And by the time anyone understood what it meant, it was already too late to stop it. In 1901, a company in Springfield, Massachusetts built America's first production motorcycle. 2 years later, in a wooden shed in Milwaukee, two brothers named Davidson and their friend William Harley assembled a second one. Neither company was thinking about style. They were thinking about transportation, about moving a person from one place to another more efficiently than a horse. The V-twin engine arrived in 1907 at Indian, and in 1909 at Harley Davidson. 2 cylinders, set at an angle, firing in an uneven rhythm that no inline engine could replicate. It was not designed to sound a particular way. It sounded that way because of physics, because of the angle between the cylinders, because of the firing order, because of the gap between each pulse. Nobody planned for that sound to become an identity. It simply did. For 40 years, that sound meant nothing except transportation. Then, on a single summer weekend in 1947, a photograph was taken, and the cruiser motorcycle stopped being a vehicle. It became something else entirely, something that no engineering team had planned for and no boardroom had approved. The town was Hollister, California. A motorcycle rally. A hot weekend. Thousands of riders. Some of them drank too much. A photograph appeared on the cover of Life magazine. A man on a motorcycle, bottles of beer arranged around him, grinning at the camera. The caption suggested chaos. The reality was more ordinary. But the image had already done its work. 6 years later, in 1953, Marlon Brando wore a leather jacket and rode a motorcycle in a film called The Wild One. He played a rebel without a specific cause. Someone who rode simply because riding was freedom, and because the road did not ask you to explain yourself. A journalist in the film asked him what he was rebelling against. He answered, "What have you got?" In that moment, cruiser motorcycles became something far more than transportation. They became a statement. But that statement was quiet in 1953. A film, a photograph, a leather jacket. The volume was about to get turned up, by 2 men, 2 choppers, and a road trip that would be watched by more people than anyone expected, in a film that was actually about something much darker than motorcycles. Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper loaded customized Harley Davidson choppers and rode across the American Southwest. Long front forks, low seats, the stars and stripes across the tank. The engine making that sound beneath them as the road unrolled ahead. Easy Rider was about freedom and its limits, about what America promised and what it failed to deliver. But what audiences around the world took home, what they remembered in the car park afterward, was simpler. Two men on motorcycles. A landscape so vast it made everything else seem small, answerable to nothing except the road itself. By the early 1970s, Harley Davidson had understood something important. Riders were already doing this themselves, extending forks, stripping fenders, reshaping machines into something personal. So in 1971, Harley built the first factory custom, the FX Super Glide. The chopper spirit, available from the showroom floor. No fabrication required. No garage full of tools. The factory had become the customizer. The modern cruiser had arrived. And then came the decade that nearly destroyed it. Not through competition. Not through changing taste. Through something nobody who loved these motorcycles expected to be the threat. The company that owned the name almost ran it into the ground from the inside. By the 1980s, manufacturers on the other side of the world had noticed something that Harley Davidson's own struggles during that decade had temporarily obscured. The American appetite for cruiser motorcycles was not declining. It was simply waiting to be met more reliably. Yamaha introduced the Virago in 1981. Honda followed with the Shadow in 1983. Kawasaki brought the Vulcan in 1984. Suzuki the Intruder in 1985. Built in metric measurements rather than Harley's imperial inches, nicknamed metric cruisers, they were often more reliable and less expensive than the American machines they resembled. They did not have the sound. Not quite. But they had the shape, the low seat, the feet-forward position, the unhurried, relaxed attitude that said, "This machine is not in a hurry, and neither are you." By 1997, cruisers represented 60% of the entire American street motorcycle market. Harley Davidson alone held a 52% share, the most dominant position any motorcycle category had held in decades. The industry looked at those numbers and assumed they would last. They did not. What came next wasn't just a sales dip. It was a fracture, and one of the most respected American motorcycle brands in the world simply ceased to exist because of it. No warning. No farewell. Just gone. The 2008 financial crisis cut cruiser sales in half almost overnight. Buyers who had been financing large, expensive machines suddenly could not. Companies that had expanded aggressively found themselves exposed. Smaller brands disappeared. Even Harley, which had survived the Great Depression and the years when a bowling company had owned the brand and built machines so unreliable that riders called them hardly drivable. Even Harley began to feel the pressure. Then in 2017, Polaris made the decision to discontinue Victory Motorcycles, an American cruiser brand they had built from nothing over 19 years, in order to focus resources on Indian. No warning. No farewell ride. The riders who owned Victory machines felt the loss personally. The brand had been genuine, capable, and respected. And then it was simply gone. The demographic numbers told a harder story still. The average age of a cruiser buyer had been climbing steadily for years. By the 2020s, the core cruiser customer was over 50. The generation below them, in their 20s and 30s, were choosing adventure bikes, sport bikes, or in growing numbers, electric machines. And it was at exactly this moment, when the cruiser's future looked most uncertain, that Harley Davidson did something that nobody in the history of the motorcycle industry had ever attempted. Something so specific, so bold, and ultimately so impossible, that it tells you everything you need to know about what this sound actually means to the people who built it. In the year 2000, Harley Davidson applied to trademark the sound of their V-twin engine. The potato-potato-potato rhythm. The heartbeat that had defined the brand for nearly a century. They wanted, legally, to own it. Japanese manufacturers objected. The application was eventually withdrawn. But think about what the attempt itself reveals. Harley Davidson understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the sound was the brand. That a rider who had never seen a Harley could identify one before it came into view. That the emotional connection millions of people felt to cruiser motorcycles lived not in specifications or performance figures, but in something more primal. A vibration, a rhythm, a sound that arrived before the machine appeared and lingered long after it had passed. You cannot trademark a feeling, but you can build your entire identity around one. And for over a century, that is exactly what the cruiser motorcycle has done. And just when it seemed the category might be contracting, shrinking toward its most loyal but aging base, it did something unexpected. It split. It went two directions at once. And both directions produced machines that would have seemed impossible 10 years earlier. At the top end, the Triumph Rocket 3 arrived carrying a 2,458 cubic centimeters engine, the largest ever fitted to a production motorcycle. The Ducati Diavel V4 proved that cruiser proportions could carry performance that would embarrass most sport bikes. These were not slow, comfortable Sunday machines. They were powerful, precise, and genuinely modern, wearing a cruiser silhouette over engineering that would have seemed like fiction a generation earlier. At the other end, Honda's Rebel 1100 and Royal Enfield's Meteor 650 brought the cruiser experience to younger riders at lower prices. Lighter weight, modern electronics, accessible. And in India and Southeast Asia, where Royal Enfield had been building simple, affordable cruisers for decades, an entirely new generation of riders was discovering the same feeling their counterparts in 1960s America had discovered. The low seat, the relaxed posture, the engine beneath them, marking time in that rhythm that physics invented and nobody planned. The category had not contracted. It had expanded in both directions simultaneously and found new people at each end who were asking the same original question without knowing it. And that question, the one that keeps getting asked, the one the V-twin keeps answering, is not about motorcycles at all. It never was. Here is why cruiser motorcycles never go out of style. Every other motorcycle category tells you what it is for. A sport bike is for speed. A touring bike is for distance. An adventure bike is for the road beyond the road. They make promises about performance. They have destinations. A cruiser tells you nothing about where it is going. It only tells you what it feels like to be there. Unhurried. Present. Moving through the world at the pace the world deserves. That feeling does not go out of style because it is not a trend. It is not a response to a cultural moment or a development in technology. It is the answer to a question that every generation asks differently but never stops asking. What does it feel like to be free? The V-twin has been answering that question since 1907. It intends to keep answering it. My friends, if you ride a cruiser, or if you have always wanted to, you already know this. You have heard someone tell you that your taste is old-fashioned, that the future is somewhere else, that what you love is being left behind, that the numbers say something different now. Let them talk. The sound has outlasted every prediction of its death. Every bowling company, every financial crisis, every declaration that the young riders have moved on. It will outlast this prediction too. Before you go, tell me in the comments which moment hit you hardest. Was it the photograph that changed everything in Hollister in 1947? The bowling company that nearly destroyed Harley Davidson from inside? The day Harley's lawyers tried to trademark the sound of their own engine and failed? The night Victory motorcycles simply disappeared? Or the 2,458 cubic centimeters engine that proved a cruiser could be terrifying? Subscribe if you want to follow these roads wherever they lead next. Until then, keep the engine turning and never apologize for the sound it makes.